Okay, I want you to picture something we've, I think, all been in. You walk into a room.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a funeral or, a really high-stakes board meeting. Or maybe it's just one of those super fancy dinner parties where there are way too many forks next to the plate.
Yeah, and you have no idea which one to use.
Exactly. You step across that threshold and you suddenly feel it.
Oh, yeah, it's unmistakable.
It really is. It's this heavy, kind of invisible weight that just presses down on you. It's a force that tells you, like, how to stand, how loud you're allowed to talk.
What jokes are okay?
And definitely jokes are not okay. It just sort of tells you how to exist in that space. It feels like there's a script that everyone else got a copy of, and you're just terrified you're going to ad-lib a line and, I don't know, ruin the whole show.
And that's a universal human experience.
Yeah.
I think most of us, we just chalk that up to internal things, right? We say it's anxiety or insecurity or just good old-fashioned peer pressure.
Right. We think, oh, I'm just being awkward, or I need to read the room better. We turn it inward. But what if that pressure, what if it isn't just in our heads? What if that invisible weight is actually an objective external force?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's as real and as measurable as, I don't know, a sack of bricks or a gust of wind?
And that question, that is the perfect way to get into our deep dive today. We are exploring the mind of the man who argued exactly that. He believed that these social pressures, they're not just psychological quirks. He called them social facts. And he argued that they're forces that exist completely outside of us, but control us just as rigidly as, like, the laws of physics.
We are talking today about Émile Durkheim. Now, I know the name. It might sound a little dusty to some people. Like an old textbook you forgot in your high school locker.
Yeah, it has that ring to it.
But digging into his life and his work for this, I realized this guy is basically the architect of how we see the world today.
He really is. I mean, alongside Karl Marx and Max Weber, Durkheim is considered one of the principal architects of modern social science. They're kind of the holy trinity, if you will.
Right.
But while Marx was focused on conflict and economics, and Weber was looking at, meaning and bureaucracy, Durkheim was just obsessed with a different question. And it's a question that feels incredibly relevant right now.
Which is?
What holds us all together?
The glue of society.
Exactly, the glue. Durkheim was writing at a time when the world was, it was tearing itself apart. Traditional religion was fading, kings were being overthrown, the Industrial Revolution was upending every single community in Europe. He just wanted to know, in a modern world where we don't all pray to the same God or answer to the same king, why doesn't society just dissolve into chaos?
And the scary part is, sometimes it does. And we are going to get into that too. We're going to talk about what happens when that glue fails, a concept he called anomic. And then we're going to look at how he tried to prove all his theories by studying the most private, most desperate act a person can commit.
Suicide.
Yeah.
It is a heavy topic, for sure, but it's an essential one for understanding his work. We have a huge stack of sources today. Biographical details from his life in France, his really groundbreaking books like The Division of Labor and Society, Suicide, and the Elementary Forms of Religious Life.
And a lot of modern scholars weighing in, too.
Oh, yeah, plus a lot of commentary from people who have spent decades just unpacking his work.
So let's go. Let's travel back to the late 19th century. Who was this guy? I know he's French, but what's the origin story?
Okay, so Émile Durkheim was born in April of 1858 in a town called Épinal. It's in the Lorraine region of France. And to really get what drove him, you have to understand his family, his background. He wasn't just born into a religious family. He was, for all intents and purposes, born into a dynasty.
A dynasty? What were they, royalty?
A religious dynasty. He was the descendant of a very, very long and unbroken line of rabbis.
Oh, wow. 8
generations. His father was a rabbi, his grandfather was a rabbi, his great-grandfather. You get the picture. The expectation for Émile was crystal clear.
He was going to be a rabbi.
He was going to be a rabbi. He even started his education in a rabbinical school.
That is a lot of pressure. I mean, talk about social facts just weighing on you from the moment you're born. Here's the family business that's been running for 200 years, son. Don't mess it up.
It's the perfect example. But then, at a pretty early age, he just be. He made a radical break. He switched schools. He decided he was going to lead a thoroughly secular life. He didn't just step away from the family business. He stepped away from that entire religious worldview. He wanted to understand morality and society, but not through divine law.
Through science.
Through science.
That's a huge move in the 1800s. Was his family okay with that? I'm picturing a very tough conversation at the dinner table. Dad, I'm not going to be a rabbi. I'm going to be a sociologist. which wasn't even a thing.
Well, what's interesting is the sources suggest he didn't actually cut ties. He stayed close to his family and to the broader Jewish community. A lot of his key collaborators later on were Jewish, including his nephew, Marcel Mauss, who became a really famous anthropologist himself.
Okay, so it was an intellectual break, not a personal one.
Exactly. Intellectually, he was on a totally different path, and he was a brilliant student. He gets into the École Normale Supérieure, the ENS.
And that's like the French equivalent of, what, Harvard or Oxford?
I'd say it's even more exclusive. It was the intellectual pressure cooker of the entire French Republic, and the class he entered in 1879. It's legendary now.
Who was in it?
Well, his classmates included people like Jean Jaurès, who went on to become this massive figure in French socialism, and Henri Bergson, the hugely famous philosopher.
So he's in this room with all these geniuses. He's rejected the family path. What does he actually want to do?
He wants to study society,
No.
scientifically, but there was a really big problem.
There's no department for that.
The French academic system at the time didn't have a sociology department. It just didn't exist. You had philosophy, you had history, literature. And Durkheim, he found those humanistic studies, frankly, a little uninteresting. He wanted to apply the scientific method observation, data, rigorous analysis to ethics and human behavior.
So he didn't just choose a field to go into. He had to basically build the whole building he wanted to work in.
That's a perfect way to put it. Some scholars talk about Durkheim's imperialism of sociology. He's aggressive. He wanted to carve out a very specific territory for this new science, and he did it. He eventually set up the first European Department of Sociology at the University of Bordeaux in 1895.
And he wrote a kind of instruction manual for it.
He did. He wrote a manifesto to lay out the rules, titled, fittingly, The Rules of Sociological Method.
Okay, and this is where we get to that key concept you mentioned at the top, social facts. Because if you're going to make something a science, you need something to study.
Right.
Biologists have cells, physicists have atoms. What does a sociologist have?
They have social facts.
Right.
And Durkheim's definition was very precise. A social fact is a way of acting, thinking, or feeling that is, 1, external to the individual,
Okay, outside of me.
and 2, endowed with the power of coercion.
External and coercive. Okay, let's unpack that. External means it's not just a feeling I have in my own head.
Correct. Durkheim insisted, and this was a big deal, that we have to treat social facts as things.
Things. Like a table or a chair is a thing. How can a social norm be a thing? That seems like a stretch.
I know, it sounds weird, but he made a distinction between material social facts and immaterial ones. The material ones are easy to get. Laws written down in a book, the architecture of a city, the way a courtroom is laid out. You can see them, you can touch them.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the immaterial facts are the tricky ones. Things like morality or a sense of national pride or what he called the collective consciousness.
So how can a feeling be a thing? Give me a concrete example.
Okay, the classic word he uses is a flag. Let's think about a flag. Physically, what is it?
A piece of cloth with some dye on it, on a stick.
Exactly. A material object. You can go to a craft store and buy the components for, I don't know, a few bucks. But that object is ingrained with this immense immaterial meaning, right?
Yeah, of course.
It commands respect. If you see your country's flag, you might feel a surge of pride. If you see someone setting it on fire, you probably feel a surge of anger. In the military, you are required to salute it. The physical flag is a thing, but the social fact is the power that it holds over your behavior and your feelings.
And if I decide, hey, you know what? I don't care about this piece of cloth, and I use it to wipe down my car.
Then you run right into the coercive part of the definition. You will feel the pushback.
Yeah.
People will yell at you. You might get ostracized from your community. In some countries, you could actually be arrested. You didn't invent the rule that flags are sacred. It existed long before you were born. That's the external part. And if you violate that rule, you get punished. That's the coercive part. For Durkheim, that is the proof that it's a real, objective thing.
That actually makes perfect sense. It's like you don't realize gravity is there until you try to jump off a roof. You don't realize a social fact is there until you try to break a social rule.
That is the perfect analogy. And for Durkheim, this was the key. This was what would make sociology a real science. If these facts are real and observable, then we can study them, we can measure their effects, and maybe we can even figure out the laws that govern them, just like in physics or biology.
So he's got his new science, he's got his object of study. Now he needs to use it to answer his big question, the one we started with, the glue. What holds us together?
And that takes us directly to his doctoral dissertation, a huge book called The Division of Labor in Society, which he published in 1893. He was looking at this massive shift that was happening all over Europe. People were leaving small rural villages and flooding into huge anonymous industrial cities.
Right. The shift from a world where everyone knows your name to a world where you're just another face in the crowd.
And Durkheim's argument was that this wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a fundamental change in the very nature of social solidarity. He identified two basic types of this glue. He called them mechanical and organic solidarity.
Mechanical and organic. Let's start with the old way first. Mechanical.
So think of a small traditional village a few hundred years ago. Durkheim calls this solidarity mechanical because it works like a simple machine. It's based entirely on similarity.
Okay.
Everyone is basically a cog, and all the hogs look the same and do the same thing. You all probably work in agriculture. You all share the exact same religious beliefs, the same moral code. You raise your kids the same way.
So the glue holding us together is the fact that we're all basically the same person. Our experiences are almost identical.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
In these kinds of societies, what he called the collective consciousness, which is just the sum total of beliefs and sentiments common to the group, is incredibly strong. It's intense. It covers almost every aspect of life. There's very, very little room for individuality.
And what happens if you break a rule in a society like that?
Well, the law is overwhelmingly punitive. Because everyone shares this powerful moral code, an offense against one person or against one rule is seen as an attack on the entire community. The collective feels violated. So the punishment is usually public, it's harsh, and its main goal is to satisfy that collective anger. Think of a public hanging, or putting someone in the stocks in the town square. It's all about repressing the deviant to reassure the group that the moral order is still intact.
Okay, so that's the village, mechanical solidarity. But then we all move to the city, the factories open up, we get all these specialized jobs. This is where organic solidarity comes in.
Yes. And here, Durkheim switches his analogy. He starts using a biological analogy. Think of a complex living body, like a human being. Your heart does a very different job from your lungs. Your liver does something totally different from your brain. They are not similar at all.
No, definitely not. I do not want my lungs trying to pump my blood. That would be a mess.
It would be a total disaster. But they are desperately, fundamentally dependent on each other. The heart cannot function without the oxygen from the lungs. The lungs are useless without the blood being pumped by the heart.
Okay, I see where he's going.
Durkheim argued that modern, complex society is held together by this very principle, difference and interdependence. I'm a podcaster, you're a sociologist, someone else is a doctor, someone else is a plumber. We don't really know how to do each other's jobs, so we need each other to survive.
So the glue shifts. It's not, we're all the same. It becomes, I literally cannot get through the week without you. My car breaks, I need a mechanic. I get sick, I need a doctor.
Exactly. The division of labor, the specialization of all these different roles is what creates this new, powerful type of solidarity. And he said it's caused by what he called dynamic density.
Dynamic
It's
density.
just a fancy term for more people, leading to more interactions, which leads to more competition. In order to survive in that more competitive environment, we have to specialize. We have to find our niche.
And how does the law change in this kind of society? We're not doing as many public hangings in modern cities.
The law becomes primarily restitutive.
Meaning?
Its goal is to restore order, to put things back the way they were. If you crash your car into mine, we don't gather the whole neighborhood to publicly shame you. The court just says you have to pay to fix my car. We try to repair the damage so that the complex social machine can keep running smoothly. The focus shifts from punishing a sin to fixing a problem.
But wait a minute. If we're all becoming so specialized, so different, doesn't that make us more isolated, more individualistic? We talk about the problem of individualism all the time today.
And that is the amazing paradox that Durkheim identified. He saw that as society becomes more complex and organic, the individual actually becomes sacred. But, and this is the classic Durkheim twist, he didn't see individualism as the enemy of society.
He didn't.
No. He believed that modern individualism is a product of modern society.
Wait, society created the individual. That seems backwards.
It does, but think about it. He has this amazing quote where he says, "Society instituted it and made of man the God whose servant it is. We have a cult of the individual. We worship individual rights, individual expression, individual achievement. Well, why? Because modern organic society requires us to be distinct individuals in order to function. The cult of the individual is itself a social fact."
That is a head-scratcher. We are individualistic because the collective forces us to be.
It connects right back to that external coercive pressure. You feel pressure from society to be yourself, to find your unique passion, to stand out from the crowd. That pressure doesn't come from inside you. It comes from the collective.
Wow. Okay. So
Mm.
we had this organic society, this body with all its different organs working together, but bodies get sick. Organisms get diseases.
They absolutely do. And Durkheim was very much thinking like a doctor for society. He was what we call a functionalist. He believed every part of society, every institution serves a function to keep the whole organism healthy. But sometimes it develops pathologies. It gets sick.
And the number one diagnosis he came up with is a word that I think is so incredibly useful for understanding the world today. That word is enemy.
Enemy, yes. It's often translated from the French as normlessness.
Normlessness. So, like no rules, the purge, total chaos.
Not necessarily no rules at all. It's more like a breakdown of the norms that give us guidance and meaning. Durkheim argued that enemy happens when social change occurs too quickly. Think of a sudden chaotic economic boom or a devastating depression or a massive wave of migration.
So the connections between people, the shared understanding of the world, it all just kind of breaks.
Yes. The old rules don't apply anymore, but new ones haven't formed yet. Groups lose contact. The shared understanding of what is expected of me or what can I reasonably hope to achieve, it all dissolves. He has this really haunting quote. He says that without regulated relationships and common objectives, society is nothing more than a pile of sand waiting to be scattered by the wind.
A pile of sand. That's such a lonely, bleak image. Billions of individual grains just touching each other, but with no real connection.
That is the feeling of enemy. It's the feeling of being morally adrift. You don't know your place in the world. You don't know what's enough. Durkheim believed that human desires are naturally infinite. It's society's job to regulate them, to give us a sense of limits. When those regulations disappear, our desires become a source of torment because they can never be satisfied.
He also mentioned another pathology, right? The forced division of labor. What did he mean by that?
That's his term for when the system of specialization goes wrong. It's when an unfair system based on power or inherited wealth forces people into jobs and roles that they aren't naturally suited for.
Okay.
If you have a society where your future is determined by the class you were born into, rather than your actual talents and abilities, that creates deep-seated tension and unhappiness. It's like forcing a heart cell to try and function like a kidney cell. It just makes the whole organism sick and unstable.
Okay, now here's something in the notes that really made me do a double take. We're talking about the sicknesses of society, but Durkheim actually argued that crime is not a sickness. He said crime is normal, functional even. That just sounds wrong. I mean, how can murder or theft possibly be good for society?
It's one of his most provocative arguments, isn't it? But if you follow his logic, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. He argued that crime is, and this is a quote, bound up with the fundamental conditions of all social life. In other words, you simply cannot have a society without deviance. It's impossible.
But why? What possible good does a criminal do for the rest of us?
He says crime serves at least three crucial functions. First, deviance challenges the status quo, and in doing so, opens the door for social change. He uses the example of Socrates.
Socrates, the great philosopher.
To the authorities in ancient Athens, Socrates was a criminal. He was officially charged with corrupting the youth and not respecting the city's gods, and they executed him for it. But his crime, his radical independence of thought, was what paved the way for a whole new morality, a new philosophy. Without the criminal who dares to be different, society stagnates and dies.
Okay, I can see that. It's the troublemaker, the heretic, who ends up inventing the future. What's the second function?
Crime reaffirms our collective norms and values. This goes back to that idea of punitive justice. When a crime is committed and the community comes together to punish the criminal, it draws a bright, clear line in the sand. It brings all the law-abiding people closer together and reminds everyone, this is the boundary. We are the people who stay on this side of it.
It's like when everyone in an office bonds because they're all complaining about the one guy who keeps stealing lunches from the fridge.
That is a perfect modern example. It creates camaraderie. And that's really the third function. The collective reaction to deviance increases social cohesion among the so-called good people. It reinforces our sense of being a we because we are united against them, the rule breakers.
He had this amazing thought experiment to prove this point. The Society of Saints. Can you walk us through that? Because I just love this image.
It's brilliant. So he says, imagine a monastery, a cloister populated by perfect, morally exemplary individuals, saints. In this community, there's no murder, no theft, no violence. You would think, okay, in this society, there is no crime.
Right. Yeah, that would be the definition of a society of saints.
Durkheim says no. He says that in that society, faults that seem completely trivial to us, like, say, being a little too sharp in conversation, or showing up 5 seconds late to prayer, or maybe letting out an inappropriate chuckle, those tiny faults would create the exact same scandal and outrage that a serious felony creates in our society.
So they would just lower the bar for what they consider to be a crime.
Precisely. They would magnify those tiny imperfections to the level of major crimes because society needs that process of judgment and boundary setting to exist. Society needs to define something, anything, as bad so that it can collectively define itself as good.
That's just kind of a dark thought. We will always find a witch to hunt because we need the hunt itself to feel like a community.
That is the dark implication, yes.
Okay, so we've looked at the big picture of society. Now we are going to zoom in, way in. We're going to talk about Durkheim's most famous, most controversial, and probably his most intense work. The book is simply titled Suicide.
And this book, which came out in 1897, was a methodological masterpiece. You have to remember, at the time, suicide was seen as either a purely personal tragedy, a result of individual psychology or mental illness, or sometimes people blame things like the weather. Yeah, there were theories that rainy climates caused higher suicide rates. It was seen as an individual or natural act.
And Durkheim's goal was to prove that even this most lonely, private, individual decision a person can make is actually determined by social facts.
Yes, this was his ultimate test case. If he could show that suicide rates were governed by social forces, he would prove the power of his new science of sociology once and for all. And his method was to use quantitative data statistics. He compared official suicide rates across different countries, different religions, different social groups. He was doing data science before it was cool.
And what did the data start to show him?
He found these incredibly clear, persistent patterns. For instance, across Europe, Protestants consistently had significantly higher suicide rates than Catholics.
Okay, why? Was there something about the theology, like the view on salvation?
He argued it wasn't about the specific beliefs so much as the social structure of the community. He created this brilliant model. He plotted suicide rates along 2 key social axes, integration and regulation.
Integration and regulation, okay.
Integration is about how attached you feel to a group, the strength of your social bonds. Regulation is about the extent to which your life is controlled by norms and rules.
And based on these 2 axes, he identified 4 distinct types of suicide. Let's go through them because this framework, it just explains so much about the human condition. Let's start with type 1, egoistic suicide.
Okay, so egoistic suicide happens when integration is too low.
Too few social bonds.
Exactly. The individual feels detached from society. They feel like they don't matter to the group, and the group doesn't matter to them. This is what he believed was happening in the Protestant communities.
Because Protestantism, with its focus on free inquiry, is more individualistic.
Yes. The whole idea is it's just you and the Bible. You interpret the sacred text for yourself. Catholicism, by contrast, is much more communal. You have rituals, confession, a priest, a rigid hierarchy. All of these things bind you more tightly into the group. For Durkheim, that lower level of integration among Protestants left individuals more vulnerable when they faced personal hardship. It's the suicide of excessive individualism. The thought process is something like, I am alone and my life makes no difference to anyone.
Okay, so that's too little integration. What's on the other end of the spectrum? What happens when there's too much integration?
That leads to the second type, altruistic suicide. This is where the group completely dominates the individual. The person's own life is seen as meaningless compared to the needs of the whole.
Like a soldier jumping on a grenade to save his platoon.
That's the classic example. Or suicide bombers, or members of a doomsday cult who commit mass suicide. They don't do it out of sadness or loneliness. They do it because they believe it is their sacred duty to the group. The I has been completely erased by the we. They are so integrated that they cease to exist as separate individuals.
Got it. Okay, so that's the integration axis, from egoistic to altruistic. Now let's look at the regulation axis, the rules. What happens when regulation is too low?
This is anomic suicide, and this is the one that really surprises people. This type of suicide occurs during times of massive social and economic disruption. Now, we'd expect it to happen during a depression, right? People lose their jobs, their homes, they fall into despair.
Sure, that makes intuitive sense.
But Durkheim's data showed that suicide rates also spike during periods of sudden economic booms.
Wait, when people are getting rich, getting everything they ever wanted, why would that lead to suicide?
Because the regulations have disappeared. The old rules have changed. In a stable society, you have a pretty good sense of what you can reasonably hope for. I'm a baker, so I can hope to one day own a slightly bigger shop. But if the economy goes crazy and suddenly anything seems possible, your desires become limitless. You no longer know what is enough. You achieve one goal and immediately 100 new ones appear. That normlessness, that anomie, leads to a very specific kind of despair. The despair that comes from infinite, unsatisfiable ambition.
That is profound. It's like the lottery winner's curse. When anything is possible, nothing is ever satisfying.
Precisely. You're constantly chasing a horizon that keeps moving away from you.
And the final type, the other end of the spectrum, too much regulation.
That he called fatalistic suicide. This is the suicide of the person whose future is pitilessly blocked, whose passions are violently choked by oppressive discipline. There is no hope of ever changing your situation. The examples he gives are people who are enslaved or prisoners serving a life sentence. Their lives are so overregulated that they see no way out but death.
So, egoistic, altruistic, anomic, and fatalistic. It's like a map of all the ways society can crush us, either by holding on too tight or by letting go completely.
It really is. Now, it's important to mention that modern scholars have some very valid critiques of this particular study.
I was going to ask, has this held up?
Well, there's a big methodological issue called the ecological fallacy.
Oh, jeez.
It's the mistake of using data from a large group to draw conclusions about individuals within that group. So just because Protestant regions had higher suicide rates doesn't definitively prove that it was the individual Protestants who were committing suicide. It could have been, say, Catholics living as a small minority in a Protestant area who felt isolated and alone.
Ah, I see that. And I also read somewhere that the data itself might have been unreliable because Catholic communities where suicide was seen as a mortal sin might have been more likely to cover it up, to list the cause of death as something else.
That's another huge and very valid point. Suicide reporting was notoriously messy in the 19th century. But even with all those data issues, the theoretical framework, this idea that human beings need a healthy balance of integration and regulation to thrive, that remains an incredibly powerful and influential idea for understanding mental health even today.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to his final major work. He's tackled the division of labor, he's tackled suicide. Now he decides to take on God, the elementary forms of religious life.
Or, more accurately, he decides to take on the social origin of God. This book, published in 1912, was his last great masterpiece. He wanted to find the common denominator of all religion, the most basic essential form. So he decided to study what he considered to be the simplest, most primitive societies, specifically Australian Aboriginal tribes and their practice of totemism.
And he had a very particular way of defining religion. It wasn't about a belief in a supernatural being, was it?
No, because he pointed out that many major religions, like Buddhism, don't really have a god in the Western sense. So his definition was different. He said all religion is based on a fundamental division of the world into two domains: the sacred and the profane.
The sacred and the profane. The special and the everyday.
Exactly. The profane is just ordinary, mundane, life working, eating, sleeping. The sacred are those things that are set apart, that are forbidden, that are surrounded by rituals and inspire awe. So for him, a religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices related to sacred things, which unite all their followers into a single moral community, which he called a church.
Okay, so here we go. The big reveal. The huge plot twist of Durkheim's entire career. When these Aboriginal tribes are gathered together worshiping their totem, which is usually an animal or a plant that represents their clan, what are they actually worshiping?
Durkheim's conclusion is stunning. He says the totem is the flag of the clan. When they are worshiping the totem, they are, in fact, unknowingly worshiping the collective power of the clan itself.
God is society.
That is the big reveal. God is society, personified. Think about it. What are the attributes of God? It's a force that is greater than you, that existed before you were born, that will exist long after you die, that gives you your moral rules, and that has the power to punish you or to lift you up. To Durkheim, that is a perfect description of society.
So we basically invented God as a symbol, as a way to visualize the power of our own group.
That's the argument. And he has this amazing concept to explain how this happens, how this feeling is generated. He calls it collective effervescence.
I love that phrase, collective effervescence. It sounds like a fancy soda.
It's much more intoxicating than that. He says, imagine the clan is scattered across the landscape for most of the year, hunting and gathering. Life is dull, it's hard, it's profane. But then they all come together for a big ceremony, a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
They dance all night, they sing, they chant, they paint their bodies. The energy in the group builds and builds, it becomes electric. In that moment, you feel carried away. You feel stronger, more powerful, more alive than your ordinary self.
It's like being in the middle of a mosh pit at a concert or in a stadium when your team scores the winning goal.
Yes, it's that exact feeling. You feel a power moving through you that does not feel like it's coming from you. And since these early humans didn't have a concept of social psychology, they attributed that powerful external energy to their sacred object, the totem. They thought, the spirit of the totem is here, it's moving through us. But for Durkheim, that spirit was just the supercharged energy of the group itself.
So all religious ritual is basically society getting together to worship itself, just to recharge its batteries and keep the social bond strong.
That was his radical argument. And he took it even one step further into what he called the sociology of knowledge. He argued that even our most basic categories of thought, our concepts of time, space, causality, are social constructs. They are collective representations.
Wait, hold on. Time is a social construct. I mean, the sun rises and the sun sets. That's not social.
But the concept of time, of a week, a month, a year, an hour, where does that come from? He argues it comes from the rhythm of social life. We have a calendar because we need to coordinate when the next festival or ritual is. We understand the concept of space because of the way the clan arranges its camp into sacred and profane areas. Even language itself is the ultimate collective representation. You didn't invent the words you're speaking right now. They contain the accumulated wisdom and categories of your society for thousands of years.
So we are literally thinking through the filter that society provides for us. There's no escaping it.
We cannot escape it. We are social animals down to the very bedrock of our minds.
This is all so brilliant, but we have to talk about how it all ends for him. Because Durkheim's life, it didn't end with a quiet, comfortable retirement surrounded by his books.
No, it ended in absolute tragedy. World War I breaks out in 1914. Now, Durkheim was a French patriot. He deeply believed in the French Republic in a secular, rational state. But he was also a prominent intellectual, a Jew, and he had a German-sounding name.
Not a good combination in the middle of a nationalist war frenzy against Germany.
No. The ascendant political right in France attacked him viciously. They smeared his new science of sociology as a German invention. They attacked his Jewish background. He was trying to contribute to the war effort, writing patriotic pamphlets, but he was being attacked from all sides.
And then the truly personal blow came.
His son, André, Durkheim had poured all his hopes into him. André was a brilliant linguist, a rising academic star. He was sent to the Balkan Front. In late 1915, he was reported missing, and then he was confirmed dead.
And Durkheim just fell apart.
He was completely devastated. By all accounts, he was never the same. He withdrew from his work. He stopped writing anything major. Friends said he never recovered from the grief. He had a stroke in late 1917 and died at the age of just 59.
That's just tragic. The man who spent his entire life studying how society holds individuals together and keeps them safe was ultimately crushed by a massive failure of society, the war and the loss it caused him personally.
It's a deeply somber ending. But his legacy, of course, is immense. The whole school of thought called structural functionalism, which dominated American sociology for decades with figures like Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton, that comes directly from Durkheim. His ideas about rituals were still hugely influential today.
And there's still some academic beef about him today, right? Something about the philosopher John Searle.
Oh, yes. The Durkheim contra Searle debate. So John Searle is a very famous philosopher who wrote a book in the 1990s called The Construction of Social Reality. In it, he talks about concepts like institutional facts and collective intentionality.
Which sounds an awful lot like social facts and the collective consciousness.
It sounds exactly like it. And critics, especially the sociologist Neil Gross, pointed out that Searle had basically just reconstituted Durkheim's entire theory from scratch without giving him proper credit. Searle later admitted he hadn't really read Durkheim because he thought his work was impoverished. It became a bit of an academic scandal, but it just goes to show that Durkheim's ideas are so powerful that people keep reinventing them, even by accident.
So let's bring this all home. After this deep dive, what's the big takeaway for us, for the listener, sitting here right now?
I think Durkheim forces us to look in the mirror and realize that we are not islands. We in the modern West, we love to think of ourselves as these autonomous, free agents making our own rational choices. But Durkheim's work shows us, page after page, that we are profoundly shaped by these invisible forces, these social facts that we ourselves created, often unconsciously, but which now hold power over us.
It's really humbling. And it explains that feeling we talked about right at the very beginning, that invisible pressure you feel when you walk into a room. That's it. That's the weight of the collective.
And in our world today, this digital world where all the traditional tribes, religion, nation, local community are dissolving, and we're forming these new, strange, and often very angry digital tribes, well, Durkheim's questions about integration and regulation are more urgent than ever. We are seeing anomie all around us. We are seeing altruistic suicide in radicalized online groups. Durkheim didn't just diagnose the problems of his time, he gave us the diagnostic manual for ours.
He really did. And here's the thought I want to leave everyone with. Durkheim believed that traditional religion was fading, that it would be replaced by science and what he called the cult of the individual. But he also insisted that society needs the sacred. It needs moments of collective effervescence to survive, to recharge its moral batteries.
Yes. We can't live on the profane, the mundane alone.
So the question for all of us is, if we're not going to church or the synagogue or the temple as much anymore, and if the old town square is gone, where are we getting our fix? Where are we finding our collective effervescence today? Is it at a Taylor Swift concert? Is it at a political rally? Is it in a chaotic, all-consuming Twitter mob? Or are we actually starving for it? And is that why so often we feel like a pile of sand?
That is the question Durkheim leaves us with.
Something to think about the next time you feel that invisible pressure. Thank you for diving in with us.
It was a pleasure.